moving on to album versus mixtape. This is interesting
Audioface debates.
because we've already seen this happen so many times. Like, what is an album? What is a mixtape? An interesting thing is right now, because of streaming, because of the way the music industry is and whatnot, we have so many albums getting shorter. We have so many albums, coming out saying that they're LPs and they're like 35, 40 minutes. When those used to be mixtapes back in the day, like
Or
5, 6 years
EPs even.
ago, or EPs, we would say, oh, you got a 30-minute thing. That's an EP, that's a mixtape, it's whatever. And this is why we made the drop category for Audioface, because it's hard to say an LP is 30 minutes because that's not a long play. But, in Spotify or in, voting communities and whatnot, they'll say that it's an LP, but it's really not. But they don't want to say it's a mixtape, or they don't want to say it's an EP or whatnot, for the purposes to make more on it because of streaming and how it works. So within that, like, to me, an album is usually at least 8, 9 to 12, 14 songs long. Anything over that, and you're getting like into YB territory. Maddie Healy, I'm pointing at you. Don't make a fucking long
I,
record.
I,
But
if you, okay, here's my end spec. And this is like a not a hard and fast rule, but I'd say after doing this podcast 5 years, it kind of is. 16 songs, 55, 58 minutes, and it better be good at that point.
it better be good. It better
Anything
be
beyond
like
that is usually like begging
even
for
that.
more
That's
time than is required than for this
yeah,
podcast or should be
16
required.
songs is a lot. Like, Radiohead don't make albums that long. I don't want
Yeah.
anybody to make a record that long. Honestly, I like the 12, 12 songs, 50 minutes is like my perfect zen. Like, I love a record being that length. That is my favorite. Within that, there's mixtapes and whatnot where you can get 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and it still be considered an EP or a mixtape to me, especially with artists who have made LPs that are past the 50-minute mark. And now you're going to try to throw me off with like a 30-minute record and say it's an LP. That's not an LP, dog. That's an EP, or it's a mixtape. It's not an LP because you have it in you. The interesting part is you have newer artists and whatnot who only make short records, because that's kind of what they've done the past 2, 3 years, to say that that's all that they do and those are their LPs. I still don't want to call it an LP, as it's not like a full album. That's why I like to say record and not album. And within that, those are going to be your EPs, those are going to be your mixtapes. But I understand why they're doing that, because of the way the music industry and streaming works. It's the easiest way to monetarily gain the best bang for your bucks. That way you don't have to spend so much time in the studio, because studio time is money. Producers cost money, managers cost money, all those things add up. They add up a lot. And if you're not going to get streamed that much because not many people want to listen to something that's over an hour long, you have to break it up and you have to make 2 a year or something like that, and you'll get more streams, you get more plays, you get more revenue, you get more money. And within that, that's just a vicious cycle. That's just the way it's going to be going for the time being. But this is, again, why we have the drop category in Audioface, because you'll have people that make a 5-song thing, a 4-song thing, and they don't want to even call it a single or an EP, but those are drops too. So you're gonna continuously see these shorter records. Example, Channel Trace. He had an album right now that was 7 songs, 35 minutes. That's like that firm category of drop to me, because it's not an LP, it's not a full album. It's a nice record, it's a nice little EP even to me for how short it is. Both in that, like, with artists who have already put out stuff that's longer, they don't necessarily need to do that to say it's an LP. They have their places for those things. I understand
To
why.
me, yeah. To me, I hate the debate because I feel like it's a cop out. Like, I feel like if an album doesn't do that well, it's a mixtape. Or if an album
Oh yeah,
isn't
yeah, yeah.
like put together well, oh, it's a mixtape. When I'm like, listen, I hear things. I think this is partially influenced by platforms. Like, platforms should maybe have a
Yeah, yeah,
mixtape
yeah.
category so artists can say this is a mixtape or this is an album or this is an EP or whatever. But this is the result of too many artists making unfinished albums. and then making too many
100%.
mixtapes that sound like albums, right? Like the line is blurred so much. And back when you had this distinction, a mixtape was usually has nothing to do with the label. It's just like an off release type thing.
It's usually a
Now
lot of
all these
things that
things are
you already
released through the
you already
labels,
recorded, but they didn't fit on the album that you made. And like, here you go. Here's some unfinished ideas and whatnot, and it's a mixtape.
which by the way used to be just called an EP. Like it's
Exactly.
and then I'm totally fine because mixtape has its own history in rap music. I'm fine with
Yeah.
that terminology. At this point, now we're just bragging about terms, and like I don't care about that. Again, power report for that. But I am. I think most of the time it's a cop out. I think it's generally down to time is the first thing. That 35 to 40 minutes, usually once you cross 40, it's definitely an album. You can get a little wiggly in the 30 to 40 minute category, as we've seen, but pretty much anything under, even if it can be really good and complete, as some albums have been, like the Vince Staples self-titled project, it's still just like too short to really be called a full album.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that being said, a mixtape, what meaning does that have in 2022? I'm not really even sure at this point. So when things are called mixtapes to me, like I take it with a grain of salt, as I will continue to do on this podcast. But like I just think it's like an interesting conversation to have because it's like it's so nebulous, right?
Yeah, 100%.